Hello everyone, and welcome to this recorded webinar on Erasmus Key Action 1 Adult Education Staff Mobility. This webinar is aimed at organisations looking to apply for funding under the decentralised strand of Key Action 1 known as Adult Education Staff Mobility. The webinar will primarily focus on how to fill out the application form as well as on some hints and tips to help you with the application process. So just to give you an overview of what this recording covers, I'll start by giving you a quick introduction to Key Action 1 Mobility for Adult Education Staff and what funding is available. Then the main focus of the session will be the application form. We'll firstly talk you through what you need to do beforehand. Then we'll go through the application form itself together, filling out certain parts and showing you how to use the distance calculator and how to validate the form. Then we'll round up the key points. Finally, we'll mention the next steps and how to contact us for support in the run-up to the deadline. Before we begin, I just want to reiterate how the EU referendum affects applications under the 2017 call. Obviously, as Erasmus Plus is a European Union programme, we have received questions over recent months about how it is affected by the vote to leave the EU. So we'd just like to reassure you that obviously the UK is still a member state of the European Union, and for this reason it fully participates in the Erasmus Plus programme. The referendum result does not affect UK organisations applying for Erasmus Plus funding in 2017 or taking part as a partner or a consortium member in 2017. Applications that are successful under the 2017 call will be awarded funding for the duration of the project. Now, so a few words about Key Action 1 in the field of adult education. In general, Key Action 1 Learning Mobility of Individuals is all about providing opportunities for individuals to improve their skills, enhance their employability and gain cultural awareness through transnational mobility. As a basic overview, the aim of a Key Action 1 adult education project is to provide adult education staff with opportunities for professional development, which also increase their organisation's adult education provision. This funding also offers an opportunity for staff of adult education organisations to gain competencies in addressing the needs of adult learners with disadvantaged backgrounds. And given the current context concerning young migrants, refugees and asylum seekers, the Commission welcomes projects that train adult education organisations in such areas as training refugee adult learners, intercultural classrooms, teaching adult learners in the second language, classroom tolerance and diversity. Key Action 1 Mobility for Adult Education Staff is managed by the UK National Agency at Ecoris UK, which means that we at Ecoris promote the call for proposals, select successful projects and monitor them throughout their lifetime. So in this slide you can see the types of activities that you can undertake under a Key Action 1 Mobility for Adult Education Staff project. So organisations active in adult education can apply for funding to support any of the following activities within a project. Firstly, teaching training assignments where staff deliver teaching or training in a partner organisation abroad. Then structured courses or training events abroad. And these courses and events will support the professional development of the adult education staff that takes part. Finally, job shadowing. So staff undertake a job shadowing experience in an adult education organisation abroad. Be aware that courses which have content related to EU funding or bid writing are not eligible for funding under Key Action 1 Adult Education. Mobility activities can last from 2 days to 2 months, excluding travel time, and the days of the mobility must be consecutive. Funding can be used to support staff engaged in adult education activities, which includes support staff, managers and guidance staff, as well as teachers and trainers. Remember that these are all professionals involved in non-vocational adult education. The training that they deliver or that they receive abroad must respond to clearly identified staff development needs and must contribute to your organization's strategic approach on adult education provision. The learning outcomes of the training must also be appropriately recognized and shared widely with others in your organizations as part of the dissemination activities. Remember that the staff that goes abroad must be based in the UK, obviously in the case of a UK organization applying for funding. So the staff that you're sending must be based in the UK, and they must undertake their mobility in an eligible organization based in a different program country. Funding is not available under Key Action 1 Adult Education for UK organizations to receive staff from other organizations abroad from another program country. The organization sending the participant must apply to the national agency in their own country for funding. Right, now I'll go through the roles that organizations involved in a project can have. So it's important to note that Erasmus Plus funding cannot be accessed by individuals under adult education. So an organization must apply on behalf of the participants it plans to include in the project. So there are various roles that organizations play in the implementation of an adult education staff mobility project. And now I will outline these roles and the responsibilities that each one should undertake. Firstly, the applicant organization. This organization is in charge of applying for the mobility project, and if this is successful, for signing and managing the grant agreement and reporting. The applicant can be a single organization or the coordinator of a national mobility consortium of partner organizations from the same country which want to send adult education staff on mobilities abroad. The National Mobility Consortium coordinator can also, but not necessarily, act as a sending organization. So the sending organization is in charge of selecting staff and professionals active in the field of adult education and sending them abroad. The sending organization is either the applicant or a partner in a national mobility consortium. The receiving organization is in charge of receiving foreign adult education staff and offering them a program of activities or benefiting from a training activity provided by this staff. The specific role of the receiving organization depends on the type of activity and the relationship with the sending organization. So the receiving partner may be a course provider in the case of participation in a structured course of training or training event, or it could be a partner, that means any other relevant organization active in the adult education field, and this is in the case of job shadowing or teaching assignments. In this case, the sending organization, together with participants, should agree the objectives and activities for the period abroad with the receiving organization and specify the rights and obligations of each party before the start of the activity. These organizations, all of the organizations that are involved in Key Action 1 Adult Education project must be legally registered in the country where they're based. So your receiving organizations must be a legal entity within their program countries. An important point to remember about receiving organizations is that within Key Action 1 Adult Education Mobility projects, you don't need to identify a receiving organization at the application stage, but if you do so, your application will have greater chances of being funded because assessors will clearly see who you're working with and what their background is. UK consortium partners, on the other hand, must be identified in the application form, and we'll see how that works later. It's important that you link your Key Action 1 project to the overarching European priorities and show the added value of carrying out your project on a European level. When you look into the European priorities, it's important to keep the general objectives of the Erasmus Plus program in mind, as well as the important features of the program. The general objective of Erasmus Plus is to contribute to a number of policies, which are those that you can see on the slide. So firstly, the Europe 2020 strategy, including the headline education target. Secondly, the strategic framework for European cooperation in education and training, shortened as ET 2020. The sustainable development of partner countries in the field of higher education. The renewed framework for European cooperation in the youth field. The objective of developing the European dimension in sport. And the promotion of European values in accordance with Article 2 of the Treaty on the European Union. And these include human dignity, freedom, democracy and equality. The important features of Erasmus Plus are detailed in Part A of the 2017 Erasmus Plus Program Guide and include recognition of skills and multilingualism. Please look through these objectives and features carefully in your own time. Please also have a look at the specific objectives for the field of education and training on page 28 of the program guide. So now I'm going to be covering more specific information about preparing and submitting the application eForm. Once you have decided on your Key Action 1 adult education project idea, and you have found partners and thought about how to address different European priorities, you will need to ensure that you have obtained a PIC for your organization before you start to fill in the application form. The PIC is a 9-digit code and stands for Participant Identification Code. This is a 9-digit numeric code which is unique to your organization and will be essential to complete your application form. So if you haven't got a PIC, you need to complete a 2-step registration process. But please double check that your organization definitely doesn't have a PIC. We'd recommend you ask colleagues at your organization in case someone else has already created a PIC, because if your organization already has a PIC, you must use that one and not create a new one, because having 2 or more PICs for the same organization will create problems. So if you do need to create a PIC, these are the 2 steps that you need to follow. Firstly, you'll need to register on EU Login. This platform of the European Commission was formerly known as ECAS, and it changed its name a couple of months ago, but its function is essentially the same. So EU Login is a point for user authentication to a wide range of European Commission tools. The registration process is really simple, and you can download a guide from our website which will talk you through how to do this. So the guide is in the Before You Apply section, and you will find the link here. I'll just show you where it is. So the instructions on creating a PIC are under Before You Apply, registering your organization. Now going back to the steps of the registration process. You will then need to obtain the PIC through the participant portal. So the registration process will take you to this portal, which is the single entry point for the electronic administration of Erasmus Plus projects, as well as projects funded under other EU programs. So after starting the registration process on the portal, you'll be asked to provide information about your organization, as well as to upload documents related to your organization. These documents are needed to prove the legal status and financial capacity of your organization, and it's essential that the information on these documents matches the information you've input on the portal. That would be, for example, your organization address, legal form, etc. If you are creating a PIC, make sure that you use the correct participant portal. So the link provided on our website that I've just shown you is for the Education, Audiovisual, Culture, Citizenship and Volunteering participant portal, which is the correct one. However, if you were simply to search on the internet for the portal, you might come across the Research participant portal, which is not the correct portal for Erasmus+, so be careful about this one. Please be aware that all of your partners will also need to have obtained a PIC and have uploaded all of the necessary supporting documents on the participant portal before you can submit your application. This is because the details of all the participating organizations will be pulled into the application from the portal, and you cannot complete them manually in the application form. Finally, if you want to apply as a coordinator of a national mobility consortium, you'll also need to download the partner mandate templates from our website and have them filled in by each UK partner and signed by both parties, so by each partner and your organization. Make sure that all the information, such as the name of the organization, its address and legal representative on the partner mandate, is identical to the information in the application form. Otherwise, the mandates will not be accepted. So, after developing your project idea and completing the PIC process, you can move on to the actual application form. The form is an electronic PDF form, which we'll call eForm going forward. The eForm will need to be submitted online by the applicant organization by the deadline of the 2nd of February 2017. Keep in mind that this is 11 AM in the UK, as the deadline for applications officially is noon Brussels time, but obviously it's 11 AM in the UK. The application form is available to download from the Apply for Adult Education Staff Mobility Funding page on the Erasmus Plus website, and you should save the eForm as a PDF to your computer. I will show you where you can download the application form from. See, we were under registering, under the before you apply. The application is available under Apply for Funding, Adult Education Funding, and Apply for Staff Mobility Funding. So if we scroll down, the application eForm is now available to download. That's the link to download your application form. And I was talking earlier about the partner mandate template. This can be downloaded here under Key Documents. Okay. So you will have to have Adobe Reader installed onto your computer in order to be able to access the eForm and complete it. Just to make you aware, some Mac computers are not compatible with eForm, so we'd recommend that where possible you use Windows to complete the application. And to make sure that you're working on the correct Key Action 1 application form for adult education, you should check the areas you can see on the slide. So on the top right hand corner of each page of the application form, you will see this header. So application form for the core year 2017, KA 104 will be the action type, which is adult education staff mobility. And again, further down on the first page of the application form in section B, context, the form will state that the key action is learning mobility of individuals, the action type is adult education staff mobility, the round will be round 1, core year is 2017, and the deadline will be the 2nd of February 2017 at noon Brussels time. Now I will go into the actual application form and have a run through it with you. I'll be using a test application form for this exercise, as we cannot use applications completed from previous rounds due to data protection rules. Now I'll switch on to the application form. Here we go. This is the actual application form. As I go through the form, I will use a scroll bar to go up and down the pages to the relevant sections that I want to show you, and I will concentrate on hints and tips for the main sections. And this is based on previous application rounds and the lessons we've learned about what is most important to show you. So I'll not be describing all of the information that you need to input. And then I'll concentrate on the sections dealing with the project activities and the budget, showing how these link to each other. So as I said, I'm not going to complete every single section of the form with you today. Remember that you can find very detailed guidance on each of the sections in our guide for applicants, which you can download from the same web page where you can find the application eForm. So another general feature of the eForm is that the mandatory fields are highlighted in are circled in red. They have a red border, so these must be completed before you can submit the eForm. So starting from section B, here the first thing you need to do is to select the language that you're using to complete the eForm from the drop-down menu. And for applications made to the UK National Agency, this should always be English. So I'll select this, and there you go. I've already completed a test title and start and end dates. But remember, so that in this section, the start date must be between the 1st of June and the 31st of December 2017. Then you should select the duration, which is between 12 and 24 months. And then further down, you must also select whether the end date comes up automatically depending on the start date and the duration in months that you've selected. Remember to use the drop-down calendar when you choose your start date. You need a couple of words on the project duration. You should ensure that the duration that you select is realistic for the project that you want to carry out. So the duration here is the total duration of the project, not just of the mobilities abroad. So the total duration will also need to consider all activities, including the promotion of the mobility opportunities among staff, right through to evaluation and dissemination. Here we'll need to select that the national agency of the applicant obviously is the UK in our case. Now let's scroll down to section C, which looks at the participating organisations. So here are some hints and tips. Remember that when you put in your PIC and also your partner's PIC numbers, the information will automatically populate in the form from the information that you input into the participant portal. So I've already input a test PIC, so this is a PIC, and then you need to click on check PIC, and there you go. All the information will be taken from the participant portal. You can add some information here, a contact email address, but the most important information will be taken from the participant portal. These fields that you can type in are not compulsory. So once the details appear, please double check that the details are correct, because if they are not, then they will need to be corrected into the portal. So we select a type of organization here. If you're applying as part of a consortium, remember that all the members of the consortium must be from the same program country and need to be identified here in the application form. Therefore, the form asks you, are you applying on behalf of a consortium? Remember that a consortium must comprise of at least 3 adult education organizations. So that will be you and at least 2 other UK organizations. If there are 2 consortium members in total, your application will be rejected because it is ineligible. So be careful. So here you'll select, let's select no in this case. So here you can describe, well, you need to describe your organization, relevant activities, and information on the staff that will be involved in the project. And a better quality application will be specific in this section. You will, for example, name the key persons who will be delivering the project, their skills. Also explain how your organization's previous experience of delivering projects or activities has developed the skills needed for the activities that you propose in this application. Explain how the activities that you propose fit alongside other programs that you deliver. This will help assessors understand what needs and expertise your organization has. It will make it easier to see the potential impact of the project on your organization. So the same sections will appear for partners, and make sure it is clear from the description of each partner's work and expertise why they have been chosen to participate in your project. This applies to every partner, including smaller organization. So there's this information here. Just a word before we go down to the partners. Each page of the application form has a validate button, and you must regularly click it, I would say, so that you can check that all the compulsory information has been included. So if I click on validate now, an error message will come up to tell me that the following field is mandatory: total number of staff. So I need to go back here and input a figure there, and then I can validate. And it will take me through the next compulsory field that has not yet been completed. So I'll go down to the bottom of the section about the applicant. So you've got in section C2 the partner organization. I've already input a test pick. Again, I check the pick and the information will come up about my Finnish partner organization. Just wanted to show you one more thing on the email address. If, for example, I input test as the email address and I click on validate, the form will ask me to provide a valid email address. So it also picks up errors like the email address. So if I put @gmail.com, the form will be happy. It will just bring me to the next compulsory field. Now let's scroll down to section D, European Development Plan. So I've given information about my partner. The purpose of the European Development Plan in section D is to ensure that the planned mobility activities are relevant both for the individual participants and for the organization as a whole. Its purpose is also to ensure that the activities will have a positive impact on the quality of teaching and learning provided by the applicant or consortium partners here in the UK, and should demonstrate that the proposed activities tie in with the organizations or consortium's wider European international strategy. Please see the guide for applicants for more information on completing this section. On to section E, description of the project. So here are a few hints and tips on how to complete these boxes. Here you must provide a rationale for your project and identify both the project's objectives and the issues and needs that the project will seek to address. Here, show a clear link with the priorities and objectives of Key Action 1, which are on pages 31 to 34 of the program guide. And as I've said before, you should also think about which of the general objectives for education and training are relevant to your project. These are again listed in part in the program guide towards the beginning of the program guide. You should describe the added value in terms of the skills and knowledge participants will acquire from completing a European mobility. And if you have added partners to the application form, you'll also need to include information regarding what each of the partners will bring to the project in terms in terms of the expertise, their skills and experience of working with the identified target group. Now on to section F, participants profile. Here you should provide details about how the participants will be identified and selected, which activities they'll participate in, how they will contribute to the project, and how the project will benefit them. Again, be specific here about who your participants will be and how you'll select them. For example, include information on the courses that your adult education staff teach and how the training abroad will relate to this. You need to explain in detail what recruitment process you and your partners will undertake. For instance, how many participants you'll involve and how the processes will ensure that the most suitable staff are selected, whilst ensuring a fair process. Your learning outcomes in section F1 must also be clearly linked to the aims of your project and relevant to the needs of your participants. So they will be agreed with both the staff of the organizations, the course providers and or the partner organizations that offer training events or job shadowing activities. You'll need to include the expected competencies that will be acquired or improved by your participants, both personal and professional. And don't forget recognition of learning outcomes. So you'll do that, for example, by using Europass. And it's not sufficient to add the tools by using the add button and clicking. You also need to explain in the narrative boxes how you're going to use them. If you're not familiar with Europass and the tools that you can select, you can find more information on page 278 of the program guide. Now let's look at section G, preparation. First subsection here is section G1, practical arrangements. And this section is all about, again, the practical arrangement, which means arranging appropriate accommodation, transport, insurance, visas, how you will ensure the safety and protection of participants. You'll also explain how participants will be mentored and supported, any language and or cultural preparation that you will put in place, any practical logistical orientation, and how you will agree learning needs and objectives with participants. Obviously, the practical arrangements will depend on the objectives and activities of your particular project, but these areas that I've just mentioned are some standard elements that you should cover in this section. Section G2, project management, is for you to explain clearly how you will ensure that the project and the grant will be managed effectively and transparently in order to deliver the planned objectives and activities to a high standard and within the time frame and budget available. You'll also need to describe here how the project activities and results will be monitored and evaluated during the life of the project, and provide details of the staff who will be involved in these activities and how often quality checks will be undertaken. Address here how you plan to handle risks or difficulties. For example, what processes will you use to handle conflict resolution within the partnership? In subsection G3, preparation of participants, you'll need to go a little bit deeper into preparation. So the pedagogical, cultural and linguistic preparation that your staff will receive to ensure that they are ready to live and work in a different environment and in a different country. Now let's scroll down on to section H, main activities. This is a really important part of the application form, and it starts with 4 text boxes. In the first box, you need to include the main activities that you plan to organize, providing a description of the role each project partner will play. So basically, we're going to implement, for example, a job shadowing activity and give a lot of detail, as much detail as you can about the activity. In the second box, you'll need to detail what communication methods you will use with your partners and any relevant stakeholders and why. In the third box, you'll need to explain what monitoring activities will take place to support your participants and who will carry out these, and evaluate and how you will evaluate the participants' progress. Examples here could be participant logbooks and having regular Skype catch-ups between the participant and their line manager back in the UK. Justification for accompanying persons should also be given in the fourth box if you are including accompanying persons, and we would only expect to see accompanying persons being included in a Key Action 1 adult education project to support participants with special needs. Now, we will cover section H.1 activities details in more detail as the data input in this section will feed into the budget section, and data in this section and the budget must correspond, otherwise you won't be able to validate and submit your eForm. So the activities that you need to detail in this section are grouped under the three categories that I explained earlier. So looking at the drop-down menu, you've got job shadowing, structured courses, and teaching training assignments abroad. So I'll select structured courses in this test. You should add a table for each activity that you plan to include during your project and select a number of answers from the menus available. I'll just give you I'll give you a few more words on adding activities later in a minute. So I'd like to highlight a couple of points to start with. You'll see that the country of origin when you complete, obviously if you're applying as a UK organisation to the UK National Agency, the country of origin will be the United Kingdom. And you will see that Serbia appears in the list of possible destination countries. So if you scroll down after the program countries, these are the overseas countries and territories, you will see Serbia. Serbia is displayed here because in 2017 it will implement the necessary measures to prepare for full participation in Erasmus Plus as a program country in the coming years. However, it is not an eligible destination under Erasmus Plus actions in the field of education and training. So for your Key Action 1 adult education project, it is not possible to travel to Serbia. So even if it's there, please do not select it as a country of destination in any case. And you might have noticed that at the top of the eForm on the first page, there is a special warning message in red to let applicants know that any activities flows to Serbia are ineligible under the rules of Erasmus+. So let's select Finland in this example, because this is where our partner organization, receiving organization, is based. The next field is distance band. So you will need to use the Commission's online distance calculator to fill out the distance band, and a link to the calculator is provided in our guide for applicants. And the distance that you will need to select the band relates to the distance between the cities and towns. So choose the nearest city or town nearest to your head office and the head office of your partners. The distance that comes up, the band that comes up, is the band which you'll need to input into the application form. And the band that you select will then automatically populate the corresponding travel unit cost in the budget section. The cost will be a contribution towards the return journey costs, and ensure that you put the right distance band in, as this will be checked out at assessment stage, and if it is incorrect, it could affect the quality of the application and the budget. I will switch to the distance calculator now. So here it is. I've already opened it. I've started to select, so these are the fields. This is the European Commission's online distance calculator. So in the from, this is the nearest city to our head office, the head office of the UK applicant organisation. So I've selected Birmingham, and then I will select Helsinki, which is where our partner organisation is based, and then hit calculate. So you see, this is the return journey. This is the distance that the calculator generates. It's 1,844.42 kilometers. Therefore, if we look back at the application form, the distance band will be this one, 500 to 1,999 kilometers. Okay. Okay. The next field is to indicate the duration of the mobility activity, excluding travel days. So in this example, I will say that the mobility abroad will last for 10 days and we will have 2 travel days. Always consider the maximum travel days you can have is 2. Look at travel arrangements. Obviously, they may change by the time that you get to go abroad, to organize a mobility abroad, but look into the possible travel arrangements. That will enable you to put in more accurate duration and travel days at this stage. So the form automatically calculates a total duration of 12 days. We will input 10 as the number of participants that we want to send abroad. In this example, we won't have any participants with special needs or accompanying persons. Obviously, if you do want to include any of these participants out of the total number, you'll need to put the relevant figures in here. Okay. So any additional flows under structured courses, training events will need to be added using the plus button. So again, you'll select United Kingdom, Finland, perhaps for a different duration this time. Same distance band, but you want to send another 2 participants for 2 days. So you've got a different duration here. Add activity is for adding a different type. So let's say in your project you also want to send staff on job shadowing. Therefore you add an activity rather than adding a flow. Okay, I hope this is clear. So let's just remove the activity, because we want to just keep it simple and remove this flow to again keep it simple in this example. Now on to section I, follow up. Some hints and tips are to be again as specific as possible about the impact of the project in addressing the needs you have identified earlier in the application. You need to describe the expected impacts on individual participants, the participating organizations, the target groups they work with, and any other relevant stakeholders. Don't forget to specify the impact of the project at local, regional, national, European, and international level. For dissemination, you need to show how you have carefully planned your dissemination and mention what messages you want to share, what activities you'll undertake to do this, and when. You should be as clear as possible about who you will target for your dissemination activities. As I've said, plan for your dissemination activities to take place throughout the project lifetime, not just at the end. For more tips about dissemination, have a look at Annex 2 of the program guide. That's at the very end, and this provides practical guidance on how to go about disseminating your project results. Finally, in subsection I.3, give specific details of the evaluation methods and indicators of achievement that you plan to use to assess whether and to what extent your project has achieved its objectives and results. Obviously, detail both qualitative and quantitative indicators of achievement, and you should attach numerical targets to these indicators where possible and explain how you will be looking after this task. Don't forget that your evaluation activities should consider the learning outcomes and how the project has contributed to addressing the aims of Key Action 1 and of adult education and training activities. Now we'll scroll down to section J, the budget. So getting the budget right is an important part of your application form, and it is important that you've carefully considered and justified the budget that you request. It's important also to be aware that if the project is approved, the applicant organization will receive the grant and will be responsible for distributing it, amongst the partners to ensure that the project is delivered effectively. There is no maximum grant amount that you can request for an adult education mobility project, but you should ensure that your budget that you input in the application form is in line with the activities planned and is realistic in relation to your operational capacity. The budget under Key Action 1 Adult Education is built up of unit costs on the basis of participants, except for the heading called Exceptional Cost and also the Special Needs Support budget heading. These are budgeted for and reimbursed on the basis of actual costs. So unit costs are a set amount per participant, and it is a contribution towards the cost. So for some unit cost you'll actually spend more, and for some perhaps less than the unit cost that you can request. And unit costs are used to help make the funding simpler to understand and manage. On the other hand, actual costs means obviously that you will receive funding for how much you actually plan to spend, and they are used for the budget heading Exceptional Costs and Special Needs Support and are fully or partially reimbursed. So the budget categories for Key Action 1 Adult Education Staff Mobility, that you will see a table for each in the application form, as travel, which includes top up for expensive domestic travel costs, individual support, organizational support, course fees, special needs support, and exceptional costs. As you can see, a lot of the information here has been pre-filled based on the information that we've already entered in section H, activities details. So under travel, individual support, and organizational support, you will have unit costs. Looking at travel, your request should reflect the main activities you've detailed in section H1, and it will. So you have the option here to amend the number of participants, but these come from section H1. Leave them as they are here. So just a couple of words under the top up cell. Under the 2017 call, you can request funding to cover domestic travel costs which exceed €225 because the point of departure in the country of origin and or the final destination in the receiving countries are particularly remote from main transport hubs. So if you need to request this top up, you need to provide a full justification in your application form, and you can request €180 per participant affected. In section J.2, you'll check that the request for individual support is correct. So obviously the duration, number of participants appears here in line with the information in section H1, and you need to ensure that this is correct. So individual support is a contribution to the subsistence costs of participants during their activity. And the cost that calculates here depends on the number of participants, the type of activity, the duration, and the country where the activity will take place. Section J3 is about organizational support, and that is money to be used for the management and implementation of your main activities. Once again, most of the information has been filled in based on section H1. Just double check that this is correct. Section J for course fees relates to requests for funding for course fees, and it won't always appear. This section will only appear if you have listed structured courses, training events as one of the activities under section H.1, which I have done. So nothing appears, you just need to click on the plus button you will select your activity, which is from section H1, so I've only got A1. So I will state the duration of the course. I had put 10 days, so I'm assuming the course is a 10-day course. And these fields will be automatically populated. Section J.5 is to request any special needs support, and this is any additional costs that your organization or any partners will incur to enable participants with a disability or other special needs and accompanying persons to take part in your project. For example, you may want this funding to buy specialist equipment which is specifically for this project, or to cover for accompanying persons subsistence and travel costs. Special needs support is calculated on the basis of actual costs and will be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Therefore, it's important that you make clear in this section why you need this cost and a breakdown. You should also detail the inclusion of a special needs participant in the main narrative of the application. So once again, if you want to request special needs support, you click on the plus button, you add the activity that the special needs support relates to. It's 0 because I had selected 0, and in the description of the cost box you must provide all the relevant detail, and here you just request the grant that you feel you need. So I'll put section J6, exceptional costs again are to be budgeted as actual costs, and you need to clearly state in the description box why you need these items and a cost breakdown. Under Key Action 1 Mobility for Adult Education Staff, you can request exceptional costs funding to fund 2 specific areas, not just anything. So these areas are costs connected to providing a financial guarantee if the national agency asks for it, or expensive travel costs of participants who travel from or and to outermost regions and overseas countries and territories. So with exceptional costs, only a certain percentage of the costs that you think you will incur will be covered by the EU funding. So for example, for expensive travel costs from and to overseas countries and territories, the EU grant will cover 80% of the actual costs. So note that in the application form you should enter the grant amount requested, which corresponds to the percentage allowed. So here you will need to work out what your costs, the total actual costs for traveling to an overseas countries and territory will be, and then calculate 80% of that cost and request that 80%. So to reiterate a general piece of advice on the budget section, make sure you've clearly described the main activities of your project and that the budget you request is consistent with your description. Okay. This box is for you to provide any additional details about the budget that you are requesting. So feel free to complete it, although it is not compulsory. So section K is all about summarizing the information that you've provided in the form. The first section here is providing a summary of your project. This summary will be used by the European Commission and the national agency in their publications, and it will also feed into the Erasmus Plus project results dissemination platform. So it should be written in clear, plain English, avoiding any technical or sector-specific jargon to ensure that it can be understood by the general public. Scrolling down, section K1 and K2 give a summary of participant organizations, activities, participants, and the budget. Here's your budget summary. Calculates your total grant. This is what you are requesting. Please check these sections carefully and make sure that the information here is absolutely correct. So in case it isn't, you can make any necessary changes further up in earlier sections. Also, have a good read at section L checklist This is a checklist for you to help make sure that you've done everything that you need to do in relation to preparing for the application form and filling it in. Also, please read section M, Data Protection Notice. Right. Now on to section N, Declaration of Honour, and section O, Annexes. So compulsory annexes to a Key Action 1 Adult Education Mobility application are the signed Declaration of Honour, and only if you're applying on behalf of a UK Mobility Consortium. You also have to annex the mandates for each of your UK consortium partners, signed by both the consortium member and the applicant. So really the only compulsory annex that will need to go with all of the adult education application forms is the Declaration of Honour. And only if you are applying on behalf of a consortium, you must also annex the mandates. So the Declaration of Honour is section N itself. So this is what the legal representative declares. This is your organisation statement that all the information you have provided is correct to the best of your knowledge, that there is no conflict of interest, and that you will take part in dissemination and exploitation activities if required. It expresses a commitment to the activities that you have listed in the application form. So the legal representative of the applicant organisation must print this section N, read it carefully, complete this section here that I'm hovering over by hand. They need to sign it. Please note here that the national ID field and the organisation stamp are not required in the UK. The signed declaration then needs to be scanned and attached as an annex before the application form is submitted online. Your application will be deemed ineligible without this attached Declaration of Honour, so please don't forget it. Please also make sure that the date is before or on the submission deadline of the 2nd of February. Note that scanned signature, electronic signature are not accepted, so your legal representative will need to print out this piece of paper, sign it by hand, and then scan it. So the mandate template can be downloaded from the key documents section of our apply for funding page, as we have seen. You need to ensure that the information on the mandates is identical to that on the application form and as a consequence the participant portal. Again, mandates must be signed and dated in original by the partner organisation, and the applicant will not accept any electronic signatures. You can also attach other annexes, such as a training needs analysis, a sample work program, and this is your section O to attach the annexes. So you will add the Declaration of Honour, you will add the mandates if you are in a consortium, and you can add any annexes that you feel will strengthen your application. But remember that we expect all of the key information, so the information that is key to the quality and content of your project, to be included in the main body of the application form. Right. Now a few words on section P, submission. As we've said, there's a final validate button here, but please validate as you go along so that you can quickly identify where you haven't completed compulsory information. As I've said before, if you hit the validate button and something is wrong, you will be taken to any section. So the first incomplete section that you have been missed. And you need to resolve these issues, so you need to complete all of the sections and complete the information in the correct format before you can submit the form. You can complete the form offline, obviously. You don't need to be connected to the internet. You only need to be connected when you hit the check pick button, because that will retrieve the information from the portal. But other than that, you can complete the application without being connected to the internet. However, you must obviously be connected when you hit the submit online button here. Before you do that, save the final completed version of your application form to your computer in case of any submission issues. And again, as we've said, note that the deadline is mentioned in the form is Brussels or Central European time. The form needs to be submitted by 11 AM in the UK on the 2nd of February. And we would advise that you leave plenty of time for completing your application and then submitting it online before the deadline in case there are any difficulties and you need to amend, change information, etc. These difficulties can include technical difficulties, and sometimes, in some cases, there are technical issues that prevent the form from being submitted correctly. So if there are technical difficulties, you will hit this button, submit online, and error messages will come up. And under status should come up. The form will tell you that the form hasn't been submitted correctly. If this happens and you are unable to submit the form online correctly, you should follow the alternative submission procedure outlined in our guide for applicants. What this means is that you have to take a screenshot of the submission summary page, so section P4, showing what error you have come across and demonstrating that the eForm could not be submitted online. Then you also need to email your application and annexes to erasmusplus@ecoris.com within 2 hours following the official deadline, so by 1 PM UK time on the 2nd of February. However, be very careful that we'll only accept this submission procedure if the error message is recorded under submission summary in the eForm with a timestamp prior to or on the deadline date and time. And also remember that there are some error messages that are not accepted as technical issues. So if you follow the alternative submission procedure for these errors, your application will be deemed ineligible. So what are the errors that we won't accept? Don't worry if you can't note them all down. They're listed in our guide for applicants, which you must read when you complete your application form. So the first error that we won't accept is called error-01, and this relates to invalid data, missing fields in the eForm. This is not considered to be a technical issue because it can be corrected by completing the application form correctly and validating it again. So hit the validate button and see where the information is missing. Error 6 is another error that we won't accept because it means that the error is with the annexes. For example, the total size of the attachments exceeds the maximum allowed size of 5 megabyte, or the files that you've attached are not in the accepted formats, and these are listed in our guide for applicants. And this error can be rectified either by reducing the size of the attachments or by removing them and reattaching in the correct format. The error may also show as unknown. This means that an eForm was not submitted and no submission attempts were made, so you have to hit the Submit Online button. Fourthly, if local-01 Adobe Reader Security enabled appears as the error message, you must click the appropriate buttons in the yellow security warning bar at the top of the form in order to submit the form. So you will see a yellow band here and you must click the button on this band, and hopefully that will allow you to submit the form. Another error may come up, and this is called local 02 network connection error. And if this appears, you need to check your internet connection and try to submit the form again, or try a different network computer. So it's a problem with internet connection, and it's not technical difficulties of the eForm. Okay, this is the end of the eForm. Now let's go on to some key information, so focusing on what happens after you have submitted the application form correctly. Once we've received your application, we carry out some preliminary checks on it. Your application will be deemed eligible and will be deemed ineligible and will not go forward to assessment if it does not meet any of the eligibility criteria, if it doesn't meet the eligibility criteria specified in the program guide for Key Action 1 Adult Education Mobility Projects. These criteria are listed on pages 72 and 73 of the Erasmus Plus program guide. Please have a look at them very carefully. And I have put some examples of criteria on this slide, but remember that this is not the full list. So your application won't be eligible if your planned activities are not eligible under Key Action 1 Adult Education. For example, you submit a Key Action 1 Adult Education application to send your staff on a bid writing course or to host staff from another organisation abroad here in the UK. This is not possible. Or you submit 2 applications as a single UK applicant. So you can submit one application as a single applicant and a different application, different activities as the lead of a national UK consortium, but you cannot submit more than one application as a single UK applicant. Also, your application won't go through to qualitative assessment if your organisation has no legal personality in the UK. So if you apply, you have to be able to evidence that your adult education organisation is legally registered in the UK and has separate legal personality, which means that there is a legal distinction between the owner of the organisation and the business itself. And obviously your application won't be eligible if you submit it after 11 AM on the 2nd of February 2017. Also, as I've said, have a look at the full list of eligibility criteria and make sure you read the program guide and our guide for applicants for further details on each of these criteria. Okay. Once the national agency is happy that your application is eligible, it will arrange for it to be assessed by external experts from a qualitative point of view against the award criteria published on page 73 of the program guide. You can see the 3 award criteria on the slide, and so it's relevance of the project, the quality of the project design and implementation, and your impact and dissemination plans. You can see that each criterion is allocated a maximum number of points, and overall an application can score up to 100 points. In order to be recommended for funding, an application must score at least 60 points, but also at least half of the maximum points in each award criterion. So, for example, your application must score 60, but also at least 15 under relevance, 20 under quality of the project design, and at least 15 under impact and dissemination. And each criterion is broken down into sub-points, sub-criteria for consideration. So go through all of them. You can find them in the program guide and the guide for applicants. Also, as part of this assessment process, the national agency will check that the requested budget is in line with the funding rules that set out in Part B of the program guide. So if you haven't respected the rules for requesting the budget correctly, your requested budget may be reduced. During this assessment process, applications will also be evaluated against other relevant areas. So firstly, applicants will need to comply with the exclusion criteria which can be found in the 2017 program guide. So these are situations such as being bankrupt or participating in criminal activities, and applicants will be excluded from participating in the call for proposals, or will be rejected from the award procedure if it is found in one of the situations described in the exclusion criteria. Then the selection criteria. These are operational capacity and financial capacity. In terms of operational capacity, applicants need to demonstrate that they have the capacity to successfully deliver the project that they've applied for, and administer it in accordance with the grant agreement and the 2017 program guide. So the assessment of organizational capacity will consider elements like the roles of staff involved in delivering the project, the past history of the applicant in delivering EU-funded projects, and an outcome of this analysis may be that the national agency limits the number of live projects that an applicant manages at any one time if it doesn't have sufficient evidence that this applicant has the capacity to successfully deliver all of them. In terms of financial capacity, as you know, Erasmus Plus projects are co-funded, and the Erasmus Plus grant may not cover all of the costs that you need to incur to deliver your project. Projects must be delivered and reported using only a pre-financing payment or advance. Therefore, applicants must have stable and sufficient sources of funding to complete the project. Note that the national agency doesn't complete a financial capacity check if the applicant is a public body or an international organization, or where the grant requested doesn't exceed €60,000. Finally, when planning your project, remember that each project financed by the EU is entitled to receive only one grant from the EU budget to any one beneficiary. In cases where organizations are also receiving funding from other sources to deliver similar activities, it is their responsibility to ensure they remain compliant with the relevant funding rules, including those in relation to double funding, which are detailed in Part C of the Programme Guide. Now on to validation. The Erasmus Plus National Agency will be validating your organization, and your receiving partners will also need to be validated by their own national agencies. So the validation process is a separate process to the assessment of your application. Therefore, the fact that your organization has been validated does not mean a successful outcome for your application necessarily. So during the validation process, the national agency will check whether all of the information you've input onto the participant portal is complete and correct. We'll check whether the required legal and financial forms have been uploaded, as well as the necessary supporting documents. You can find more information about the documents that you need to upload, obviously, on the participant portal user manual and in Part C of the Programme Guide, starting on page 245. Your partners will also need to be validated by their own national agencies. Please note that organizations that are not valid cannot take part in Erasmus Plus funded projects. So if you or your partners cannot provide the correct and fully completed documents during the validation process, there may be significant delays to the processing of your application, and then the NA, the national agency, may be withdrawing its offer of funding if your application has been successful. As I stated earlier, there is no maximum budget for Key Action 1 adult education and mobility projects. However, the budget that you request must be realistic and well justified within the application. And we like to ensure that you're clear about the budget section. Therefore, this slide contains some information that we've already covered when talking about the application form. So I wanted to highlight some key points about the budget. So we've talked about budget headings working on the basis of unit costs and other budget headings working on the basis of actual costs. With unit costs, the funding is automatically calculated depending on the unit. This can be the number of participants for a certain duration or a set cost per distance travelled. Funding for actual costs is obviously based on the real cost of the item or service, but only a certain percentage of the actual cost will be covered. So we're talking about special needs support, which is covered up to 100%, and exceptional costs. I'd like to clarify an element of the course fees budget heading. Course fees funding can only be requested if you have selected structured courses/training events as an activity in the application form, and you can request a maximum of €700 per participant per project for course fees, and you must justify this request of funding in your application. It's important to note that any request for financial support, and particularly to cover special needs and exceptional costs, must be clearly explained in the application form. The assessors will not assume anything in relation to these costs, and they can recommend that some budget that you requested is cut if they have found that it's not well justified in the application form. So do provide details. Now, again, final words and key points, summing up the submission procedure. You must ensure that you have validated all of the sections of the application form before submitting, and you should also ensure that all the necessary annexes are attached before attempting submission. We recommend that where possible you scan different documents together into a single file. And you need to check that the annexes are within the maximum 5 megabyte size and in the formats accepted by the eForm. These are listed in our guide for applicants. If you still experience problems with attaching annexes after checking these aspects, you can email them to erasmusplus@coris.com before the deadline of 11 AM on the 2nd of February, clearly stating which application form they relate to. So you'll do this by providing the application hash code, and also tell us your organization details and project name when you email annexes. However, please only email annexes as an exception, as a last resort, if you have followed all of the guidance that we've prepared and you're still encountering problems with attaching annexes correctly. You will need to ensure that you are connected to the internet when you submit the application form, and if you experience technical problems which you are unable to resolve, you need to follow the alternative submission procedure, which we talked about earlier on. But please again remember the errors that we cannot accept as errors due to technical reasons. So, a few final words. These are some general key points for you to remember. So firstly, before and while you complete your application, please look back at the Commission's documents, particularly the 2017 Erasmus Plus Programme Guide and the National Agency's Guide for Applicants as available on our website. There are also other guidance documents, including there's a technical guide to the eForm prepared by the Commission. Obviously there's the guide to the participant portal, so browse through our website, particularly the before you apply and apply for funding web pages, which I went to earlier. If you have applied before, don't forget to review the feedback that you received from us, as this will include key areas for improvement, which, if applied, will enhance your chances of submitting a good quality application. Secondly, save the eForm regularly as you go so no information is lost. Ensure that correct options are selected on the application form. As we've said, while looking through the application, double check that the budget you request is accurate, well justified, and in line with Section H1 activities. Then provide relevant answers to the questions in the application, but remember that there is a character limit on the text boxes. This is usually 5,000 characters, and you can see this limited by hovering your mouse over the text boxes. Finally, get someone else to proofread your application and annexes, perhaps against the published award criteria, and leave enough time for completing and submitting your application before the deadline. Don't leave it to the last minute. So to conclude, I'd like to remind you of the support that the National Agency will be offering in the UK in the run-up to the 2nd of February deadline. for applications to be submitted under Key Action 1 Mobility for Adult Education Staff. So firstly, we're holding a live interactive webinar on the 19th of January to answer questions on Key Action 1 Adult Education and also VET Mobility. We'll offer key topics for discussion and participants will be able to ask relevant questions. To register, please visit our Events and Webinars webpage. Places are limited to 30 people per session and they are allocated on a first-come, first-served basis. Then a detailed guide for applicants on how to fill out and submit the application form is available on the How to Apply pages, applying for funding pages, which we've looked at. So again, that's the same page as the one where you'll find the application form. There is a guide for each action type that we manage in the UK, so make sure you're looking at the correct guide for applicants. If you haven't done so already, please sign up to our newsletter, as this provides all the most up-to-date information about the call and the Erasmus Plus programme. On our website, you'll also find other important information and key documents to support you with completing your application. And finally, we have a helpline where our team is available to answer your questions about your Key Action 1 application. And I've put the contact details in on this slide. So Monday to Thursday from 9 to 5:30 and Friday finishing at 5. That is the phone number to contact. And that is the email address to send any written queries you may want to send. And again, more information about all of our various contact details are on the Contact Us webpage of our website. I hope you have found this session useful today, and I wish you lots of luck with your application form. Thank you for your attention.